The core premise of Grant Cardone's The 10X Rule centers on the notion that individuals habitually underestimate the effort required to achieve their goals and should therefore multiply their anticipated actions by 10. This isn't just about working harder, it's about working exponentially smarter. Adjusting your strategies and commitment levels to dwarf the typical actions taken by most. When people set goals and have actions tied to those goals, the actual time required is often greatly underestimated. By anticipating a much larger effort than predicted, people can buffer themselves against setbacks and keep their trajectory towards achievement regardless of initial underestimation of the resources needed. One significant element explored is the crucial distinction between the four levels of action: inaction, retreat, normal action, and massive action. Cardone argues that normal action, the realm of most individuals, is simply insufficient to achieve extraordinary results. Often, people engage in activities that create the illusion of progress without pushing themselves out of their comfort zone. He asserts that most setbacks that lead to not accomplishing goals are a lack of dedication and initiative that aren't up to the task. True breakthroughs only occur when you engage in levels of activity far beyond that of what is seen as adequate and normal by your peers and community. Understanding and actively transitioning between these levels provides a useful framework for evaluating daily performance and recalibrating goals. Further delving into the psychology of success, the 10X Rule dissects the debilitating effect of fear, especially the fear of rejection, failure, or criticism. These very real fears can paralyze most people's actions into paralysis and inaction. The strategy presented to overcome fear involves proactive and massive action. Counterintuitively, this involves a focus that directs a person into acting so fervently and purposefully that the room for considering negative doubts are almost entirely eliminated. By taking significant and relentless actions, people can begin to redefine what feels safe. It reframes any feeling of uncertainty and lack of surety into positive experiences, learning moments, and moments of achievement, thus diminishing the paralysis caused by anxiety of negative outcomes. This concept transcends professional realms. It extends to any part of our life where anxiety might halt us. Moreover, the book challenges conventional thinking about the notion of being realistic. It is often touted as the goal to remain realistic in planning and ambition. However, Cardone argues this type of thinking can trap a person into mediocrity and actually encourages people to engage in inaction rather than achievement and progress. The common approach of people to make achievable targets limits their imagination to the typical output instead of imagining exponentially more significant success that's more than achievable. It could be deemed magnificent. Instead, by focusing on ambition levels that extend well beyond normal capacity, goals become much bigger and greater in output than otherwise assumed. When this framework is embraced, people become capable of pushing themselves into exponential growth and creating incredible and unforeseen accomplishments that otherwise are written off as unrealistically optimistic. This is especially useful for understanding limitations of traditional, sensible methods to setting objectives and making more effective long-term strategies. Another fascinating facet discussed within the 10X Rule is its unwavering critique of those who downplay the importance of sales and marketing. These are seen as vital forces of change in creating successful ventures. It challenges the notion that a quality product is inherently its own marketing tool. Even a brilliant product must have an appropriate strategy behind marketing, or a lot of product simply won't ever be used. If the output you have been pouring energy into remains untouched, it isn't of high quality from a consumer perspective because the product never gets a chance to offer itself. This perspective is important for anyone aiming to create a business and anyone who needs to effectively showcase what they believe in. By taking the product or service you already believe in, this idea allows people to take a level of action and effort that maximizes its true worth through creating more interest to consumers. Cardone dedicates a significant amount of discussion to the process of handling criticisms, highlighting the common trap people can fall into, that of becoming disheartened by naysayers and naysaying thoughts that are commonly in a person's own psyche. He persuasively argues that negative feedback from both internal thought and others are most frequently just manifestations of the limited ambitions of those that criticize. He uses this fact to urge individuals to resist the negative pull of these criticisms. These types of opinions or concerns are useful metrics, often an indication that progress is being made and the work and strategy are taking someone beyond typical boundaries that keep people in normal, uninspired routines. Understanding this perspective allows you to see objections to one's goals as an opportunity for growth instead of personal limitation or critique, useful for maintaining resilience. The 10x rule goes beyond mere platitudes about hard work and introduces actionable steps. It advocates the setting of targets at 10 times their apparent achievability, as most individuals do not have the scope, perspective, or optimism to set a truly large objective. It uses concrete exercises to measure actions on the 4 levels and how to actively engage massive levels of actions in particular and make consistent efforts. This strategy offers tangible pathways to move from being passively contemplative into actively achieving. This allows readers to transition away from making small, achievable objectives into much grander, loftier plans. By taking tangible measures of performance to gauge true levels of exertion can help in the pursuit of goals. The book doesn't shy away from addressing the need for discipline and resilience in order to consistently push the self toward massive action and to avoid procrastination by actively changing the personal psyche surrounding that habit. There's a very insightful exploration of understanding your own self-created barriers and habits that cause someone to defer, acting, or choosing the path of least resistance and immediate satisfaction that comes from taking time off when a task needs to be focused on and accomplished. When individuals can correctly identify these obstacles, they can understand how those small actions lead to patterns of behavior that need changing to get more consistent and focused work in order to create bigger results. Furthermore, it promotes taking personal ownership of everything happening to someone and refrains from falling into a victimhood mindset. There is an active argument that personal circumstances can and should be reevaluated. To be able to succeed, someone has to stop relying on chance occurrences as a barrier and begin understanding that they can control the outcomes much more than otherwise believed. The book illustrates how, by altering perspective of circumstances that seem impossible to overcome into those of possibility and opportunity, you unlock far greater potential. Moving away from relying on circumstance as an obstacle. Taking full responsibility is seen not as a heavy burden, but instead a crucial element to gain control of situations, and therefore move to actions and goals at levels above normal activity. In contrast to commonly discussed methods, the 10x rule presents a more confrontational and less politically correct perspective, which can feel at once invigorating and controversial. Instead of sugarcoating struggles and limitations, this method actively highlights those self-made traps with unashamed honesty, showing the user's own limitations of habit and perception and giving the responsibility to act. By offering the truth instead of common motivational speech that gives fleeting feel-good attitudes, the 10x approach seeks a far more direct and pragmatic manner that forces the user to see flaws and encourages them to actively deal with those instead of being comfortable. The use of challenging perspectives that come off as initially intimidating become less intense when progress has been achieved and more useful at highlighting true obstacles that need immediate address. The overarching concept of creating one's own reality is interwoven in all the various chapters that create this perspective of the 10x level of achievement. This framework is more than simply an aspirational objective, but rather the core foundation that gives an achievable trajectory towards goals beyond common belief of limitations. To actively create and mold circumstances for exponential outcome through deliberate, consistent, massive effort redefines expectations of one's own perceived abilities and opens doors of achievement far beyond typical limitation. By understanding that someone is their only real limiting factor in making actions, those limiting thoughts can be changed with this simple paradigm shift. The ideas expressed in the 10x rule is applicable far outside the realm of business strategy. Its essence lies in a radical reimagining of how one interacts with life itself. It offers useful insights for better self-evaluation and creates strategies and ideas to understand a much more pragmatic application of daily choices. These techniques, when considered in this format, become exceptionally effective tools not for simply achieving larger goals in the professional or personal, but rather, it shifts the overall capacity of output by making someone rethink their basic assumptions surrounding what's considered reasonable levels of aspiration and ambition in everyday circumstances. The book invites you to question not merely what you're doing, but how and why, compelling a conscious movement away from passively drifting and towards active ownership. Ultimately, the 10x rule embodies an essential and effective paradigm shift. The adoption of the conviction that personal capacity and possibilities are significantly larger than the perceived limiting factor. It promotes that by applying a multiple far larger than originally anticipated, results compound towards an exponentially large accomplishment that is easily achievable when consistently making small strategic adjustments daily. Instead of taking normal, acceptable levels of output, the message centers on breaking barriers by actively setting and attaining objectives of far larger magnitude and using feedback as a mechanism for improvement rather than something to hinder potential. This encourages one to redefine not just what they accomplish, but the degree of engagement and passion brought to daily tasks.